AudioJungle.
And I wondered if I could start by asking you, John, who works as a Chief Information Officer, but has a very personal experience and had a brush with big data. And I wonder if you could talk a bit about that, please.
Well, happy to. A big data analytics exercise involving all of the data in all the Harvard hospitals. And so we've got 4 petabytes at Beth Israel Deaconess, which is probably small data. But across the 17 Harvard hospitals, when you look at 5 million patient lives, there's probably enough richness to say, of all patients 50 and above of Asian descent who have stage 3A breast cancer that's HER2 negative, ER positive, progesterone positive, what drugs were used and what outcomes were achieved? And we did that. And we were able to discover that there were 3 medications that would be useful for her. And at the end of the chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery, she was cured. The problem, of course, there are so many protocols, so many clinical trials, it's very difficult to have precision medicine to the N of 1 patients, as you just described. But if you can look at 5 million patients and say, of patients like me, what outcomes were achieved, what side effects were avoided, and what should I tailor in my therapy? The last thing to say about her, she's a studio artist. We learned from patients like her that the use of Taxol creates neuropathy, numbness. Her desire was cure, but also function. So we actually tailored the amount of Taxol, 4 doses, not 9 doses. So she ended her treatment fully cured and fully functional.
That's an amazing story. That's an absolutely amazing story. And we should probably talk more about how we can kind of expand that to other people. But I just wanted to ask a couple of other questions. Hans Phillips, how do you see your company getting involved in big data in healthcare?
Yeah, big data is a kind of magic word, but we very firmly believe that it's not just the data, but it's what you do with the data. And actually the example that was just shared, I think, demonstrated very eloquently. It's what you do with the data, how you transform the data, how you make sure that the data is curated, is trustworthy, that you transform the data into information, that you use the information to get out of the information insights that you can use to treat patients. And then I think especially this conference, this gathering, War on Cancer, where we see so many different disciplines coming together, professionals, companies, patients being very important. It's really a war that we have to fight together, and that is also the ambition of Philips in this area, not only to provide digital information that can be used for data mining, for data use and discovery, but also to take the next step to make that data available within hospitals, which are generally siloed, between hospitals. And I think here in Boston already great strides have been taken to make that possible. Unfortunately, that's an exception. It's our desire to make that happen globally, worldwide, and also to share the data and information between hospitals and extramural caretakers, and including patients.
What kind of data are we talking about? I know you have the machines that go beep in hospitals, so you've got that kind of data.
Yeah.
And do you want to just give a 1 minute summary of what kind of data you're talking about?
Okay, 1 minute.
1 minute.
Okay, data, it starts with radiological data. You need to know where the tumor is, are there metastases. So it is not only about genomics. Genomics is extremely important. Cancer is a disease of the genes, it's a clonal disease. So you need to have that information available. It's part of the solution. But radiology is very important. It's already digitized, so you can use the data. It's curated, it's trustworthy. Next step, digital pathology. So we have introduced that system also into the market. Digital pathology, which basically opens up the pathology lab and enables sharing and high quality data also available there. And coupling the radiological data, the pathology data, the genomic data, but also patient characteristics that are important as well, particularly if you want to develop solutions that work. Comorbidity, the very old patients that may have diabetes or other problems. You have to take that into account because it will influence the result of the treatment. And that is also what we make available, not only for the professionals, but also for the stakeholders at large.
Great. Now I have some handle now on what kind of data you're talking about. So Yaron, I wanted to ask you, from your perch on a big data company, how do you kind of see the use of information evolving? I mean, there's a lot of, you're working on genomic information. Could you just give us a little bit of information about how you're using data, what you hope to do with it as a company?
Yes, well, first, thank you for having me here. It's a great being here. So our approach is basically trying to do what the great inspiring story we heard about John's wife of N of one trial and make it mainstream. So we're building this unprecedented scale of a knowledge base with a moonshot goal of having more than 1 million genomes, whole genomes in our knowledge base. And we only sequence data when our collaborators, whether it's pharmaceutical companies, cancer institutes, or individuals, are willing to share their data to be part of this knowledge base. And the concept is that if we do a whole genome on the tumor and whole genome on the germline, and there are hundreds of thousands more such genomes with high-quality clinical data, which is a main challenge. We can touch it in a second, the standardization and integration of this information. But when you can compare your genome and the whole genome of the tumor to the rest of the knowledge base and understand which drugs work and which didn't, and which are the ongoing clinical trials that address the specific mutations. And earlier we heard today, can you predict if some specific tumor will be response or not to specific immunotherapy? We try to educate the individual as well as the institution in terms of assess the risk and see what you do with it. Now, it's a major informatics challenge of both the analytics and the infrastructure, and we are trying to tap on these inflection points that we heard earlier today by Daniel Crafts, this inflection point for exponential technologies, both on the sequencing and cloud compute. We believe this is the right time, very exciting time for all of us to move into the big data approach on cancer and other therapeutic areas.
Okay, John, I want to just turn back specifically to your institution and you as a Chief Information Officer. Can you touch on this question of sort of like how big data is being used by you and your institution more broadly and how you see its use evolving?
Sure, and you said it exactly right, that we need to turn data into information, knowledge, and wisdom, because just giving 4 petabytes of raw clinical genomics or image data to a doctor is not helpful. So it's how do I take that data and then in the context of clinical care, deliver decision support in real time. Doctor, this is the right drug to order for this patient for this reason.
Yeah.
And are we storing some genomic data? Sure, well, in cancer care we are, but as we look at the whole sequence, I look at it as a $500 or $1,000 genome with $1 million interpretation problem. And so what we actually need, products and services that can, in real time, as I'm in the context of my electronic health record, provide me advice and guidance based on, maybe it's a nationally curated database of rules, maybe it's a company that offers a unique therapy or validation that the order I have is actually going to be effective. So we are doing it at a small scale in a single institution with our home-built EHR, but we look forward to the day where there are what I'll call decision support service providers in the cloud,
right,
providing us this real-time interpretation of the raw data we've collected.
So we need the analytics, basically, is
Exactly.
what you're saying. All right, well, that's probably another session we should have run on the analysis of the data. But what I wanted to sort of talk to you all about was data sharing. That's kind of a key issue. I mean, your wife benefited from open source data. Do you presumably have some strong feelings? And we're sat next to 2 people who, are working for companies that maybe need to think a more closed approach. But so how do you feel about this?
So remember, in the United States, we have 50 states, which means we have 50 different privacy policies.
Right.
And so actually figuring out how to share data for what context is difficult. So what we've tried to do in the open source software movement is created a tool called I2B2. It's available for free, i2b2.org, where you send questions to the data as opposed to the data to a central location. And so today there are 60 universities across the world that have made available gateways on their networks so that collaborators send questions. And therefore there's no issue of, oh, I'm giving up my data or there's a privacy problem. If in fact I send the Mass General a question, how many patients like this do you have? And they respond, 42. no one's privacy is going to be compromised.
Right.
Total believer in data liquidity, sharing data with appropriate respect for patient privacy preferences across all of our universities and data gatherers.
I mean, Yaron, how do you balance this issue of data sharing and protecting your intellectual property and make money? Because presumably that's what you'd like to do.
Yeah, so there are maybe two topics: element of revenue, yet sharing the data, and the secondary is the IP. On the revenue side, the data is available, yet for fee. So if you take the Economist as a model, they're generating content on a weekly basis, which is available for everybody, yet we pay to access it. The same concept, we'll gather the data, we'll invest a lot in building it, we'll provide this, anybody is available to subscribe to the data, but for a fee. The secondary piece is an IP, and it's really not an issue because there are many ways to tackle it. For once, yes, if you're a pharmaceutical company and you generate your own data, you get it, you generate your IP. If you analyze and all the data analysis downstream done with us, we can have a joint IP. But yet, if you're a subscriber and have access to the data, not necessarily to the raw data, back to the same concept, you can query the data and ask questions and discover things by your analysis based on the subscription, it's your IP. So there are really different models, and sometimes the devil is in the details, but there are ways to get there that everybody, it must be a win-win situation for everybody to make the data available as well as access the data and generate IP. That's okay.
Hans, I mean, I'm always amazed at the number of different collaborations Philips seems to have with various different people. So you must have a view about, how you protect your intellectual property, collaborate, but also retain control over things like data.
Yeah. So for data to be valuable, they need to be used and shared. And so that's a basic principle. And so in the collaborations that we have, we call that co-creation. We work with partners to really make these data available, and particularly in cancer, you have to work together in order to make progress. And of course, these data are used by all our partners as well as by us to develop the solutions based on those data. If you look at the Health Suite digital platform, which is basically our approach to promote and enable data sharing, it can be both used by ourselves and by our partners, but it is also an open solution that is cloud-based and can be used by third parties as well. So in that way, we basically provide the backbone that enables data sharing and use in a very liquid and transparent form. Also looking at developments at the moment, like in the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health. We also look at ways to make data available and, of course, contribute to that so that we can make progress. It's absolutely necessary to share data and to use them. In some cases, of course, it's necessary to use a closed system, particularly if you have to have, for instance, FDA approval or CE mark in Europe, so that you can obviously demonstrate that the data lead to diagnostic use, which is controlled. And in that sense, of course, you are more limited in what you can do with transparency and data sharing. Particularly also because the data needs to be curated and trustworthy. And it's not just the data, but it's also how you get to the data. For instance, if you do digital pathology, how you do the staining, how you standardize the outcomes, how you represent the outcomes, and of course in genomics or in molecular diagnostics it's even more complicated because it's also how you get a sample, how you treat the sample, how you conserve the sample, how you do the workup, how you do the analysis. So there, of course, the data is the result of a complete process that has to be well managed and well controlled. And so then the situation, of course, is somewhat more difficult.